Jack Mercer stood frozen, a rusted crescent wrench in his scarred right hand, staring through the half-open mirrored door of the private dressing room. Serena Vale, the most ruthless tech billionaire in America, was on her knees. Her custom-made $20,000 silk gown was torn at the shoulder, exposing a rigid spinal brace locked tightly against her skin. She couldn't breathe. Her left lung was being compressed under a jammed carbon fiber clamp. If Jack ran, she would suffocate. If he stepped inside, her security team would ruin his life before dawn. 6 hours before standing on that precipice of life and death, Jack was in a completely different world, one where numbers didn't represent stock values but mere loose change on a kitchen table. The alarm from his cracked screen phone buzzed at 8 o'clock in the evening. Outside the window of his rented apartment in Chicago's Bridgeport neighborhood, the November wind howled through the gaps in the old glass panes, carrying the biting chill from Lake Michigan. The small room smelled heavily of canned chicken soup and moisture leaking from an ancient rattling gas heater. Jack sat up, gently rotating his right shoulder. Sharp ache shot down from his neck to his shoulder blade, reminding him of the rugged scar beneath his gray t-shirt. It was the remnant of a scaffolding collapse 5 years ago, back when he was still a renowned municipal emergency medical technician, a man who had once pulled 3 children out of a flooded basement. Now his EMT license lay in the bottom drawer, covered in dust, and that injured shoulder had stripped away his ability to comfortably cradle his son. Walking softly on the bare wooden floor, he stepped toward the corner of the room where his 8-year-old son, Noah, lay asleep. The boy was tucked under an old faded blanket patterned with toy trucks. Fixed to the chest of Noah's t-shirt was a small matchbox-sized heart monitor, held in place by a strip of white medical tape. Jack knelt by the bedside, looking at the machine's small LED screen. The heart rate displayed a steady 72. Noah was born with a small ventricular septal defect. The pediatrician at the public hospital had been very clear. Urgent surgery wasn't required, but he needed monthly specialist visits to check his pulmonary artery pressure, and his maintenance medication could not be delayed by a single day if they wanted to prevent the condition from worsening into chronic pulmonary hypertension. Jack brushed his hand gently over his son's fine locks of hair. On the small study desk next to the bed, Noah had left a doodle drawn in colored pencils. It was a drawing of a skyscraper, its lines meticulously ruled with a straight edge. At the foot of the building stood a tiny figure in a blue uniform, holding a large toolbox. Noah always loved drawing architectural blueprints. The 8-year-old boy had never asked for new toys, nor had he ever complained when his father had to leave for work late at night. Child's premature maturity felt like an invisible steel beam and pressing down on Jack's chest every single day. He walked back to the kitchen and tightly capped his thermos, which was filled with strong, unsweetened black coffee. Opening his frayed leather wallet, Jack poured all its contents onto the mottled Formica countertop. 1 crisp $10 bill, 4 crumpled $1 bills, and 2 50-cent coins. A total of $14.50. That was all he had left until his online wages were deposited on Friday morning. It was enough for 3 gallons of milk and a loaf of sandwich bread for Noah, provided he didn't spend a single cent on himself on his way to work. He carefully tucked the money back into his wallet and slung his repair tool backpack over his left shoulder to avoid putting pressure on his protesting right side, then leaned down to kiss his son's forehead before closing the bedroom door. The journey to the Vera Global Tower on Wacker Drive always began with the Route 62 night bus. The vehicle was nearly empty, its floor marked by dark streaks of rainwater that had lightly frozen from the boots of night shift workers. Jack took a seat in the back row, resting his head against the freezing glass, watching the yellow neon lights of Bridgeport's convenience stores and laundromats recede into the distance. They were replaced by the colossal glass and steel structures of the Loop, where every square meter cost as much as a whole year of his rent. When the bus stopped 2 blocks away from the tower, Jack pulled up his coat collar and walked briskly through the biting wind. He didn't enter through the main lobby, where pristine white marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers and elegant security guards stood watch in tailored suits. Jack walked around to the rear, heading down a concrete ramp that led directly to the underground loading dock. Here, the smell of the city vanished, replaced by the scent of machine oil, industrial detergents, and the dry air blowing from massive ventilation shafts. Marcus Vance, the building's maintenance manager, was sitting in a cramped surveillance room filled with vintage CT monitors, holding a thermos stained with T-rings. He looked up when he heard the thud of Jack's boots on the concrete floor. Marcus didn't say hello. He reached for an aluminum clipboard, scribbled a signature in the bottom corner, and slid it toward Jack along with a gray keycard. The gas pressure in the West Zone air conditioning system on the 64th floor is dropping slightly, Marcus said, his voice raspy from years of smoking. The executive suite just hosted a dinner party for the Helion North merger deal tonight. The big shots have all left. Go up there, check the pressure flow shut-off valves, resolve it completely, and pull out before 5 in the morning. Absolutely do not touch the desks or any documents up there. The high-level security team monitors the cameras ruthlessly. Jack took the keycard and gave a brief nod. Understood, Marcus. Valve number 4 or valve number 6? Check both. Marcus returned to his paperwork. And remember to wear your rubber gloves. Don't leave any marks on the mahogany wall panels. They don't like seeing the handprints of manual laborers up there. Jack stepped into the drab gray service elevator and pressed the button for the 64th floor. The elevator shot upward, causing his ears to pop slightly from the change in pressure. When the doors opened on the top floor, the surroundings changed so abruptly that a man from Bridgeport like Jack felt instantly out of place. The corridor floor was covered in thick, ash-gray wool carpeting that swallowed his every footstep. The walls along the hallway were paneled with natural walnut and hung with abstract artwork worth a fortune. The air here was perfectly conditioned at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, carrying a subtle, luxurious scent of premium jasmine essential oil. To this world, Jack Mercer was merely a ghost in a blue utility uniform with a small maintenance company logo embroidered on the left chest. He placed his steel toolbox onto the carpet with extreme care to avoid making a sound, then unfolded a small aluminum stepladder, setting it right beneath the technical control panel hidden behind a decorative partition. Jack climbed up 3 steps and used a flathead screwdriver to unlock the latches of the drywall ceiling panel. Just as his head cleared into the utility space above, where dozens of copper pipes wrapped in black insulation ran intricately, he froze. Amidst the steady hum of the central ventilation fan, a strange sound echoed from deep within the CEO's private suite. It was a gasp, sharp and short. It was followed by a choked, gagging sound as if someone was desperately trying to pull air into their lungs but was blocked halfway through. As a former rescue worker, Jack's ears were more sensitive to this sound than anyone else's. It wasn't a sob, nor was it the sound of someone in anger. It was the distinct sound of mechanical asphyxiation. Jack climbed down from the ladder, his footsteps entirely silent on the thick carpet. He followed the sound, crossing the grand boardroom with its 20-meter quartz table, and approached the double wooden doors leading into Serena Vale's private office. The door wasn't fully closed. A small 2-inch gap revealed a sliver of warm golden light from within. The biometric alarm system on the exterior handle glowed green, meaning the occupant had personally unlocked it from the inside before the lower-level security team activated the nightlock mode. Jack gently pushed the door open and stepped into the vast office space. The scent of jasmine was thicker here, mingled with another odor, the smell of medical alcohol. He looked around. The room was empty. But that choked, breathless gasping was coming from behind the sliding mirrored door of the private dressing room in the left corner. As Jack drew closer and peered through the frosted glass gap, his body turned rigid. Billionaire Serena Vale, the woman who had just appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine the previous week in a power suit with a gaze that could freeze any competitor, was collapsed on the marble floor of the dressing room. Her priceless emerald green silk evening gown was torn wide open at the left shoulder, exposing a terrifying mechanical structure, a rigid medical spinal brace made of polymer and stainless steel, gripping her tightly from her waist up to her collarbone. The brace was warped completely to one side, pressing hard against her left rib cage. The carbon fiber locking mechanism at the back had misaligned and jammed while she was attempting to remove it alone, forming a vice-like grip that forced her ribs directly into her lung. Her face was deathly pale, her lips bruised purple from lack of oxygen, and her red manicured fingers were clawing desperately at the metal lock, unable to make it budge. In that exact moment, Serena Vale's eyes looked up and met Jack's reflection in the large mirror opposite them. It was a gaze filled with sheer terror. It wasn't the fear of a woman facing an intruder, but rather the intense humiliation of a supreme icon of power being seen in her wretched helplessness by an anonymous nobody from the bottom of society. Jack knew the rules of this world well. If he turned his back and ran right now to protect himself, this woman would likely pass out from lack of oxygen within 2 minutes, and brain damage would be a certainty before security found her. But if he stepped inside, he would be intruding upon the darkest secret of the head of a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, a place where a mere rumor about the CEO's health could vaporize billions in market capitalization on the New York Stock Exchange. Her legal and security teams would never let him live in peace in Chicago again. His Noah would lose his only support. The pain in Jack's right shoulder flared up again, but his mind had completely reverted to his years inside the ambulance. An EMT's instinct did not allow him to calculate personal gain or loss in front of a chest that had stopped breathing. He didn't rush into the dressing room to avoid being threatening. Jack stood perfectly still, immediately turning his back to Serena Vale, facing directly toward the main office door to ensure she knew he wasn't looking at her body or her torn attire. He lowered his voice, keeping his tone flat, even and thoroughly professional, just like the way he used to speak to victims trapped in highway traffic accidents. "Ma'am, I am Jack Mercer, the night shift maintenance worker for the building." "I am a licensed former emergency medical technician," Jack said, his eyes fixed on the abstract painting on the outer wall. "My back is turned and I cannot see anything. Based on what I can hear, the locking mechanism of your medical brace behind your back has misaligned at the lateral plate latch. It is compressing your left pleura. If you let this continue for another minute, you will go into clinical syncope. A small, pained groan escaped Serena's throat. "I have the right tool in my hand," Jack continued, his grip tightening on the steel crescent wrench. "I need your permission to step inside to release that latch. I will not look at any exposed skin. I will focus solely on the mechanical framework of the brace. If you agree, tap twice on the stone floor." After a suffocatingly long 3-second silence, 2 weak thud-thud sounds echoed on the marble floor. Jack stepped backward into the dressing room, never turning his head until the heels of his boots hit the edge of the interior rug. He dropped to one knee, his eyes fixed squarely on the gray polymer structure of the medical brace, completely isolating his gaze from the billionaire's trembling bare shoulder. Looking closely at Serena Vale's back, Jack couldn't help but shudder. Beneath the steel frame of the brace, running along her thoracic vertebrae from T4 to T8, were large raised and darkened surgical scars, unmistakable signs of a spinal fixation surgery using intramedullary rods after a severe high-velocity impact injury. This was absolutely not the body of a woman who had just spent a year resting spiritually at a private ranch in Montana, as Vera Global's PR department had announced to shareholders in Wall Street. This woman was running a tech empire with a body pieced together from fragments. "I am about to apply pressure to the right locking bar to clear space for the carbon breather valve," Jack announced before acting. "There will be a loud mechanical click and a sharp pain in your ribs. Exhale completely when I count to 3. Serena gave a faint nod, both hands gripping the legs of a velvet armchair tightly. Jack placed the jaws of the crescent wrench precisely onto the jammed latch, using the strength of his uninjured left arm to balance while his right shoulder tensed, absorbing the massive counterpressure. He focused his entire attention on the movement of the mechanical gears. 1, 2, 3, crack. The sound of metal snapping free rang loudly in the cramped dressing room. The carbon fiber locking bar sprang open, and the brace immediately loosened by about 2 inches, completely releasing the pressure crushing Serena Vale's left lung. The billionaire collapsed forward, her hands bracing against the floor, greedily drawing long, deep, and ragged gasps of air into her chest. The sound of air rushing back into her lungs was like dry leaves being stepped on. The color of her lips began to turn from bruised purple back to the faint pink of restored circulation. She sat like that for nearly a minute, her hair disheveled, saying nothing, only her heavy breathing gradually becoming steadier. Jack immediately stood up, gathered his tools, and walked out into the main office, standing at least 5 meters away from the dressing room door to grant her total privacy. He stood straight, eyes cast down at the floor, suddenly noticing that his rubber glove had torn a small line during the operation. Inside the dressing room, the rustle of silk fabric signaled that Serena was trying to adjust her clothes. Afterward, the space fell completely quiet. The silence stretched so long that Jack could hear the wind whistling against the double-paned reinforced glass of the tower. Before Serena could step out to face the man who now held the greatest secret of her life, a sharp, cold electronic chime from the outer hallway shattered the stillness of the 64th floor. Bip, bip, bip. It was the announcement chime of the private executive elevator, a high-speed lift reserved exclusively for board members and those holding a Level 1 Master Bypass card. Someone was coming up here at 2 o'clock in the morning, completely outside the maintenance team's schedule. Serena Vale walked quickly out of the dressing room. She had hastily thrown on a long black silk robe to conceal her torn dress in the internal medical brace. Her face had regained some of its usual icy composure, but her eyes flashed with genuine panic when she looked at Jack upon hearing the footsteps of 2 men approaching the office doors. She stepped close to Jack, near enough for him to smell the medical alcohol mixed with the scent of jasmine perfume from her skin. She looked at the red embroidered name tag reading Jack Mercer on his uniform, then spoke in a whisper that was as sharp as a blade. "It's Victor Dane. He's coming with the head of internal security. If they catch you in my office with that wrench at this hour, Victor will charge you with commercial trespassing and stealing classified documents from the Helion merger project. He has enough lawyers to lock you away in an Illinois state prison for 10 years without a public trial. And if the secret of this brace leaks out, Vera Global will collapse before the stock market opens tomorrow morning." She pointed toward the partition behind her massive desk where the drywall ceiling panel Jack had unlatched earlier still lay open. "Get up there right now," Serena said, her lips trembling but her gaze commanding. "Get inside the ventilation shaft and close the panel. Don't breathe heavily. If they find you, I won't be able to protect you." Jack felt the blood in his veins turn to ice. This woman, in just 2 short minutes, had memorized every minor detail of what he had said and was already using it as a weapon to control him. He had no choice. Jack quickly moved to the aluminum ladder, using the spring of a former EMT to hoist himself into the ceiling cavity, dragging his toolbox along. He turned around, using his fingertips to carefully slide the drywall panel back into place, fitting it perfectly against the metal grid just as the office door handle below began to turn. From the slats of the aluminum ventilation grill in the drywall ceiling, Jack Mercer lay prone, his chest pressed flat against the freezing metal beam. The weight of the steel toolbox resting beside him pressed into his wrist, leaving a deep red indentation. He didn't dare move a single millimeter. Through the narrow slits, the entire space below appeared clearly under the yellow lights of the executive suite. The sound of leather Oxfords thudding on the carpeted floor was heavy, signaling that the man who had just entered possessed absolute confidence in his status. Victor Dane stepped through the door, holding a thick leather-bound file, its paper corners secured by bright metal clips. Following behind him was a large man in the dark uniform of the Internal Security Force, his hand resting casually near the radio clipped to his belt. Victor stopped right in the middle of the room, his eyes scanning the space, sweeping past the massive mahogany desk before coming to a rest on the mirrored door of the dressing room. He hadn't expected Serena Vale to still be here at 2 a.m. His eyes narrowed when he spotted Serena's priceless emerald green silk evening gown draped halfway over the velvet armchair, one silk shoulder torn open in jagged, violent threads. Right next to it, on the glass tabletop, a small disposable plastic medical oxygen mask still held a thin, unevaporated film of condensation. A very faint, slow smile appeared on Victor's polished face. It was the smile of a hunter who had just found a trail of blood from his prey in the snow. He took 2 more steps towards Serena, who was now leaning her back against the edge of the desk, her black silk robe wrapped tightly around her to hide the instability of her structural framework beneath. "Serena, you're working late as always," Victor said, his voice warm and rounded, the precise cadence of a chief strategy officer trained at an Ivy League university, designed to maintain elegance even when preparing to execute someone's career. He placed the file on the desk, deliberately sliding it close to the oxygen mask. The representatives from the Helion North Energy conglomerate down in the Palmer House ballroom were quite anxious about your absence at the late-night discussion panel just now. There were some rumors floating around the dinner tables that your travel exhaustion has returned. People are starting to ask me if you'll be able to stand through the entire signing ceremony tomorrow. Serena Vale didn't move an inch. Her black silk robe seemed to freeze around her unnaturally rigid posture. Jack could see her fingers gripping the wooden edge of the desk so hard that her red-polished nails turned stark white. Her forehead was beaded with cold sweat, but when she spoke, her voice still sounded like a massive block of ice crashing against a crystal glass. "My health is perfect, Victor. Those rumors only originate from the mouths of those who want to see Vera's stock price plunge before the opening bell. Focus on correcting the data metrics in the financial report for tomorrow's gala. If I spot even a minor error in the merger documents before the opening bell rings, I will find someone to replace your position before the market even notices you're gone." Victor Dane gave a slight bow, both hands sliding into his trousers pockets, his expression completely devoid of fear at the threat. He stared intently at the thin sheen of sweat on Serena's temples. Then his gaze drifted down to the hem of her silk robe, which was trembling very slightly under the force of her ribcage muscle spasms. "Of course, Serena. Your devotion is always an inspiration to the entire board," Victor said, his tone maintaining its syrupy falsehood. He turned to walk toward the main door, the security officer stepping back to clear a path. "I will personally verify the terms. Have a restful night. Chicago gets terribly cold this time of year. You should be careful to stay warm." The moment his hand touched the digital control panel by the exit door to leave, Victor Dane paused for a single second. With a completely natural and swift motion, his thumb pressed the down arrow key on the touchscreen of the central heating system dedicated to the CEO's office. The number on the electronic display immediately skipped from 72 degrees Fahrenheit straight down to 55 degrees. He knew very well, from confidential medical files he had secretly harvested from private clinics, that for patients with severe thoracic spinal damage who depended on intramedullary fixation rods, a sudden drop in ambient temperature was a brutal form of torture. It would trigger violent spasms in the lumbar and intercostal muscles, rendering the patient's body rigid and causing a total loss of mechanical control within less than 15 minutes. He closed the mahogany door, leaving the room in an ominous silence. Up in the ceiling, Jack Mercer held his breath. He had seen exactly what Victor had done. Less than 5 minutes after the air conditioning system began blasting out the freezing winter air of Chicago, Serena Vale's body began to react. She let go of the edge of the desk, taking 2 faltering steps toward the armchair, but her knees buckled. She collapsed onto the thick carpet, both hands clutching her left chest, where the rigid polymer brace was seizing up beneath her robe as her underlying rib muscles convulsed violently from the cold. She didn't make a sound, her teeth clenched together so tightly that blood seeped from the corner of her lips. She used one hand to claw at the wool carpet, trying to drag her body toward the remote heating control lying on the coffee table. But the 2-meter distance now felt like an impossible mile. Jack Mercer lay on the timber beams, his teeth clenched. Now he understood the whole story. The man who had just left wasn't just an ambitious vice president. He was an executioner wearing a corporate mask, using the biological reactions of an injured body to force this woman to collapse in public. Jack wanted to push the drywall panel open and step down, wanted to use his experience as an EMT to adjust the temperature and provide first aid, but Serena's warning still echoed in his mind. He was forced to lie still, witnessing the most powerful woman in America silently endure the devastation of the pain until her muscles gradually adapted, and she could crawl up with the last of her remaining strength to turn the heater back up. Only when the first light of dawn filtered through the 64th floor windows did Jack quietly crawl back toward the service elevator to leave the building. 12 hours later, the air inside the small Bridgeport apartment grew stifling under the weak light of the late afternoon. Jack Mercer lay on his old sofa, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep after that horrifying night shift. He had barely closed his eyes for 30 minutes when a series of violent, heavy knocks rattled the wooden frame of his weathered apartment door. Noah, who was sitting at the dining table, startled and dropped his colored pencil to the floor. The boy immediately looked toward his father, his eyes wide with anxiety. The heart monitor on his chest emitted a short beep as his heart rate climbed to 85. Jack bolted up, straightened his uniform collar, and walked quickly to the door. The moment he unlatched it, the door was shoved violently from the outside, forcing him back 2 steps. 2 large men dressed in well-tailored black suits, but carrying the cold faces of those who operated in the shadows of major corporations, strode straight into the small living room without permission. They were personnel from Vera Global's Internal Risk Assessment Division, a covert unit specializing in handling employee disruptions and information leaks. Jack Mercer, the lead man who had a small scar on his left earlobe, looked at Jack with the eyes of an inspector examining a defective product. He didn't pull out a badge, merely parting his coat to reveal the silver Vera emblem pinned inside. You have 5 minutes to explain why you were present in the chief executive's private suite at 1:40 a.m. this morning when your work dispatch order only required you to check the pressure valve in the west corridor. Jack kept his facial muscles completely still. He glanced at Noah, who had stepped down from his chair and was now drawing close, one small hand tightly gripping the hem of his father's work trouser. The ventilation system of the main office connects directly to the western pressure shaft, Jack replied, his voice raspy but clear. I heard a strange noise in the ductwork and stepped to check for any mechanical obstructions. I followed the exact maintenance protocol assigned by Marcus Vance. The man with the scar didn't argue. He signaled his companion with a nod. Without a word of warning, the second man stepped straight to Jack's frayed canvas backpack, resting on a chair, flipped it upside down, and dumped its entire contents onto the linoleum floor right in front of the father and son. Wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers, and a box of adhesive bandages fell scattered, creating sharp clattering noises. Noah flinched, his tiny hand tightening around Jack's leg, his body trembling. The heart monitor on the child's chest began to beep continuously, short, frantic sounds indicating his heart rate had breached the safe threshold of 95 beats per minute. Jack dropped to his knees, one arm wrapping tightly around Noah's shoulder to comfort him, his other hand clenching into a fist so hard his knuckles popped. He looked straight into the eyes of the security operative. You don't have a police warrant. This is my private home. You are terrifying, my son. The man with the scar took a step forward, the heel of his leather shoe coming down on Jack's steel tape measure, cracking its plastic casing in two with a sharp snap. He bent down, coming close enough for Jack to smell cheap peppermint chewing gum and the scent of expensive leather from his jacket. We don't need a police warrant to protect Vera's intellectual property, Mercer, the man said, his voice dropping into a low, heavy threat. Your shift supervisor, Marcus Vance, has already signed an affidavit confirming that you were inside that suite for a total of 40 minutes, 15 minutes longer than necessary to repair a gas valve. If any financial data regarding the Helion merger leaks to the financial press before tomorrow evening, you won't just simply be fired. He cast his eyes down at the heart monitor beeping rapidly on Noah's chest, then let out a smile entirely devoid of human warmth. You know the clauses in your contract with the third-party maintenance company you signed, right, Jack? Any Level 1 security breach results in immediate termination, and the company reserves the right to retroactively revoke all extended union medical benefits for the employee due to a breach of the morality clause. Think about that, Mercer. Think about what will happen to this boy's cardiac monitoring program at the Chicago Children's Hospital if your insurance card turns into a useless piece of plastic by Monday morning. A wise father in this city is one who knows how to forget everything he saw during his shift. They turned and walked out, slamming the apartment door behind them, leaving a draft of cold air whistling through the cracks and a pile of mechanical tools scattered across the floor. Jack Mercer sat flat on the linoleum floor, burying his gaunt face in both hands. Silence enveloped the room, broken only by the steady, rhythmic beep from Noah's chest. The child looked at his father, his dark eyes holding a heart-wrenching understanding Noah didn't cry. The boy knelt beside Jack, using his small hands to gather the crescent wrench thrown under the kitchen table, wiping the dust off its steel body before placing it carefully into his father's palm. Dad, Noah whispered, his voice a little short of breath as his heart rate hadn't fully stabilized. I don't need expensive medicine. My heart feels very strong today. Don't be sad. The child's words, which felt like an invisible steel beam pressing down on Jack's chest every day, now cut straight into his heart. He gathered his son into a tight embrace, resting his chin on the boy's hair, forcing back the tears he could not let fall in front of his child. He was a father, the only wall standing between this child and the cruelty of the world outside, but that wall was now being choked bit by the powerful jaws of the Vera Corporation. After soothing Noah back to bed and giving him a sip of warm water, Jack walked into the living room. He sat at the small dining table, flipping through his old union handbook to find the number for the Illinois Department of Labor Compliance hotline. His hand shook slightly as he dialed each digit on his cracked phone screen. This was the moment he hoped for a minimum shred of justice, a legal life jacket for poor, oppressed workers. The phone connected, but instead of the voice of a flesh-and-blood investigator, the other end offered the automated monotone and soulless voice of a digital answering system. Welcome to the Illinois Bureau of Labor Compliance and Worker Protection. Currently, all our investigators are busy handling backlogged files. To file a complaint regarding workplace intimidation or unlawful termination, please press 4 to receive an electronic form via email. Please note the current initial processing and evaluation time for enterprises with over 500 employees is 45 to 60 business days from the date all documents are received. If you are facing an emergency loss of interest, please contact your county public aid office to request a Medicaid application form. Jack slowly lowered the phone before the recording could finish. 45 to 60 days. Vera Global's board of directors, that duration was merely a short-term financial reporting cycle. But to Noah, 60 days without medication to maintain his pulmonary artery pressure meant a pre-signed death warrant. The legal and labor protection system he had always believed in was nothing more than a maze of paperwork designed to stall until the poor like him were completely exhausted and voluntarily gave up. This systemic injustice didn't require violence. It suffocated him with legal waiting periods. He looked out the window. The city of Chicago had begun to light up, the towers of the Loop gleaming like massive pillars of gold piercing the night sky. He realized he didn't stand a single chance of winning this game. If he chose to play the hero, chose to go public with what he saw to expose Victor Dane, Vera's legal system would grind him to dust before he could even set foot in a courtroom. The only way to keep Noah alive was to pack their clothes, shove his $14.50 into his pocket, catch the cheapest Greyhound bus out of Chicago tonight, change their names, and find a cash-paying dishwashing job in some remote town, Indiana, where Vera Global cast no shadow. He stood up, pulled an old suitcase from under the bed, and began stuffing his work uniforms inside. He decided to abandon his honor, abandon his dignity as a man to become a fugitive, as long as his son could keep breathing. Just as Jack finished zipping the old suitcase, the phone on the kitchen table suddenly vibrated violently. The screen displayed no caller ID. It was an encrypted number routing from the Washington, D.C. area. Jack hesitated for 3 seconds before pressing the phone to his ear. He said nothing, only listening to the static hum of a highly secure transmission line. From the other end, a familiar, cold, deep female voice, carrying a weariness that couldn't be hidden behind layers of digital filters, broke the silence of the room. Mr. Mercer, my black Lincoln Continental is parked at the corner of 31st Street and Halsted, right next to the old Shell gas station. My driver has received his orders. Step outside alone and get into the back seat. We need to finish the conversation we started last night before Victor Dane pinpoints your exact location. The armored black Lincoln Continental sat idling silently next to pump number 3 at the dark Shell station. The engine remained running, producing a low, muffled hum beneath the drizzling rain of the Chicago night. Jack Mercer pulled the brim of his baseball cap low, stepping quickly through a puddle streaked with thin oil. The defensive instincts accumulated from his years as a rescue worker kept his eyes scanning both sides of the empty Halsted Street. No one was following. Using his uninjured left hand to pull open the rear door, the heat from inside the cabin immediately hit his face, carrying the scent of expensive leather and a subtle hint of cedarwood. As the heavy armored door clicked shut, the world of blaring horns and the biting cold of Bridgeport was entirely sealed off behind 2-inch thick, dark-tinted ballistic glass. Sitting in the shadowed corner of the rear seat was not the steel woman clad in the sharp power suit of the Vera Global conglomerate. Serena Vale was wearing an oversized ash-gray cashmere sweater. Her black hair, usually pinned high, now fell loosely over her shoulders. Under the dim LED ceiling lights, her face bared lines of deep exhaustion. The dark circles under her eyes couldn't be masked by foundation, and every time the car crossed a speed bump, her brow twitched slightly. An involuntary physical shock to my nerves enduring immense pressure. The vehicle slowly rolled forward, not heading toward the highway, but beginning a winding, aimless path down into the lower levels and underpasses of Lower Wacker Drive. This was a concrete labyrinth beneath the heart of the city, a place where GPS signals were disrupted, and any tailing vehicles would find it difficult to follow closely without being detected by the driver's rear-view camera arrays. Serena didn't turn to look at Jack immediately. She kept her gaze fixed out the window, where the gray concrete walls of the underground pass blurred past like endless streaks. Completely detached from what Jack had anticipated, a negotiation reeking of money or legal threats. The wealthiest woman in the tech world maintained a silence that lasted nearly 2 minutes. There was only the slight hum of the tires on the damp tunnel asphalt. "Why didn't you use your phone to take a picture when I was on my knees on the floor last night, Jack?" Serena spoke, her voice low, stripped of its CEO sharpness, carrying the pure curiosity of someone all too accustomed to betrayal. She turned her face, her dark eyes looking straight into his. Any tabloid in New York or any intermediary short seller on Wall Street would have been ready to wire enough money into your apartment mortgage or buy your son the most exclusive treatment at a private hospital without ever having to worry about union insurance again. You're a night shift technician earning hourly wages. You won't get a second chance like that in your lifetime. Jack leaned back slightly against the seat, his right hand naturally reaching up to touch his injured shoulder joint beneath his worn jacket. He didn't avoid her gaze. "Because I know what a body looks like when it fails, ma'am," Jack answered, his voice steady, carrying the raw, unpolished tone of a Midwestern laborer. "And more importantly, I know how damn awful it feels when people look at you like a piece of discarded scrap metal. Before this shoulder was crushed under that collapsing scaffolding, I spent 7 years as an EMT. I've pulled wealthy men in tailored suits out of crumpled Porsches on the I-90 highway, and I've held homeless women who collapsed from overdoses on the south side. When a person can't control their own breath, they're all the same, ma'am. They're just lives trying to hang on. I don't make a habit of taking photos of people who are close to dying." Jack's response made Serena Vale pause for a beat. Her gaze drifted across his slightly uneven shoulder, looking down at his palms, which were heavily calloused from holding wrenches and forcing levers. Defensiveness in the billionaire's eyes seemed to soften, replaced by an unspoken empathy between two people who both bore the scars of life. "They told the world I spent all of 2024 reflecting at a private ranch in Montana participating in spiritual detox courses." Serena smiled faintly, a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. She reached up to lightly pull aside the collar of her sweater, revealing a section of the rigid polymer brace still gripping her chest tightly. "The truth is, 2 years ago in Johannesburg, South Africa, my armored SUV was rammed head-on 3 consecutive times by a heavy truck in an organized ambush aimed at seizing Vera Global's critical mineral supply chain. My father sat in the passenger seat. He died right there in front of me. I survived 14 hours of continuous surgery with 3 shattered thoracic vertebrae, fixed together by 8 titanium screws and 2 internal support rods. The world thinks I'm a steel woman who can't be broken, but in reality, I am living off high-concentration painkillers in this orthotic frame every single day." She paused, her breathing turning heavier as she recalled her secret past. "Victor Dane was the one who altered our convoy's route in South Africa that night at the last minute, using the excuse of avoiding traffic," Serena said, her voice dropping lower, freezing and filled with a profound hatred. "I don't have the legal evidence to convict him in a federal court, but I know his ambition well. For the past 2 years, Victor has planted operatives in every department, from my private medical team to internal security, solely to find a single piece of hard evidence proving that my body is no longer physically capable of running the corporation. Tomorrow evening, at the gala signing ceremony for the merger between Vira and Hellion North, Victor has secretly manipulated the organizing committee to extend my opening speech on the teleprompter to 45 continuous minutes under the main stage's high-intensity halogen lights. He knows the exact endurance limit of my spinal nervous system under the pressure of standing straight is 30 minutes. If I collapse on a live broadcast in front of hundreds of strategic investors, the board will immediately trigger the key man health clause in the corporate bylaws to strip me of executive power tonight. And Victor will step into the chairman's seat." Serena turned her head back to look at the dark Chicago River drifting sluggishly outside the window as the car emerged from the tunnel. "He knows my body is a prison," she whispered, her trembling fingers tapping lightly against the car glass. "He is using my own broken bones as weapons against me." The Lincoln Continental continued to accelerate toward the North Shore area. Serena Vale opened a small metal console container on the armrest, pulling out an electronic device the size of a palm, its raw circuit boards left unencased by plastic. "Victor didn't just extend my speaking time," Serena continued, handing the device to Jack. "My security tech team just discovered that he had an unverified high-frequency jamming device installed right beneath the main podium of the Palmer House ballroom. This device emits a specific frequency band intended to disrupt the entire remote telemetry monitoring system that my private doctor uses to track my intercostal muscle pressure and heart rate via subdermal chip implant. He wants to cut off all emergency medical alerts, forcing my body to completely collapse before anyone realizes anything abnormal is happening." Jack took the circuit board from Serena's hand. He flipped it over, narrowing his eyes to inspect the lead solder joints and the frequency control chip. With his experience regularly troubleshooting smart central HVAC circuit boards in skyscrapers, he instantly recognized its operational mechanism. "This is a frequency-modulated secondary pulse transmitter," Jack said, his thumb lightly sweeping over the central chip. "It doesn't just jam telemetry. This frequency band, when running at high power, will create an electrostatic short-circuit effect on any flow-sensing devices within a 3-meter radius. It's very sophisticatedly designed, ma'am. If your doctor can't receive the data, they'll think it's just due to a network congestion issue in the building. Serena looked at Jack, a true glint of hope appearing in her eyes for the first time, not because he was a powerful man, but because he was a technician who understood the language of machines. She pulled a gold keycard embossed with Vera Global's Covert Supreme Executive logo from her handbag, along with a small platinum brooch pin. "I don't need a hero to step onto the stage to catch me when I fall, Jack," Serena said, her voice hardening with absolute resolve. "I need a medical technician, someone who understands mechanical and electronic systems, to infiltrate the high-level secondary control room of the Palmer House before I step out under the stage lights. This card grants you access to all the technical shafts behind the stage without triggering Victor's security systems. You must find a way to bypass the security loop of this transmitter and disable it from within the building's main power grid." She pressed the key card into Jack's calloused palm, her eyes locking deep into his with immense psychological weight. "If we fail, Victor Dane will use the power of the board to strip away everything I have by the day after tomorrow, and you, along with your young son in Bridgeport, won't have a single place left to shelter in this city of Chicago. We are standing on the exact same fractured bone, Mr. Mercer. Do you dare help me fix it?" The grand ballroom of the classic Palmer House Hotel tonight was steeped in an opulent, overwhelming atmosphere of suffocating tension. Beneath the soaring vaulted ceiling, decorated with Renaissance frescoes and colossal crystal chandeliers, more than 500 members of America's financial elite had gathered. The continuous clicking of lenses from major news agency reporters and the constant flashes of light created a rapid cinematic effect of movement. Men in hand-tailored black tuxedos stood in small clusters, champagne flutes in hand, whispering about the imminent stock movements that would unfold once the trading bell rang tomorrow morning. Victor Dane stood beside the main oak podium placed at the center of the stage, his right hand adjusting his white gold cufflinks. He looked down at the mechanical watch on his left wrist, 2:15 a.m., right on time. The double doors of the grand ballroom swung wide and the entire crowd turned their heads in unison. Serena Vale stepped inside, looking magnificent and commanding in an emerald green silk satin evening gown. Premium silk fabric cascaded softly, completely concealing the rigid structure of the polymer brace and the titanium supports hugging her spine behind her back. She moved with an even pace, her head held high, her elegant face maintaining an icy, unassailable composure fitting the steel woman moniker Wall Street had given her. Not a single soul in this room, including the most veteran photojournalists, could detect the tiny tremor, lasting a mere tenth of a second, in her left fingertips when she let go of the main aisle's armrest. The medical brace was currently enduring a maximum load capacity to keep her upper body entirely vertical. 30 meters away behind the one-way glass of the secondary technical control room located on the mezzanine level, Jack Mercer sat before a matrix of monitors displaying power distribution metrics and the hotel's audio circuit schematics. His blue maintenance uniform was soaked through with sweat at the back. His injured right shoulder continuously fired sharp pulses of pain from having to stretch his body to crawl through the narrow technical shaft to route the bypass cable. Through the high-resolution surveillance monitor, Jack wasn't looking at the splendor of the evening gown. He was tracking Serena's respiratory rate. Her chest rose and fell with a very shallow amplitude, a clinical sign that her intercostal muscles were beginning to overextend against the tightening of the mechanical frame. Serena Vale stepped up the 3 wooden steps to approach the main podium. The exact instant her high heels met the red carpet beneath the stand, Victor Dane's hidden jamming device activated at maximum power. On the secondary computer monitor of Serena's private medical force stationed at the corner of the stage, the wave traces representing her heart rate and rib pressure immediately turned into broken lines, then vanished entirely into system connection error codes. Serena began her speech. Her words echoed clearly through the insailing speaker system, but the moment she looked at the glass panels of the digital teleprompters placed on either side of the podium, the scroll speed of the text suddenly slowed by half. Victor Dane had ordered his technician to stretch the text content from 15 minutes to 45 minutes of continuous standing. Beneath the intense heat radiating from the high-wattage older generation halogen spotlights fixed directly overhead, the temperature of the microclimate surrounding the podium rapidly spiked. To a normal body, this would merely cause sweating, but to Serena's titanium-screwed thoracic vertebrae, the combination of prolonged standing and radiant heat began to trigger a ruthless cascade of neurological spasms. Jack Mercer observed that Serena's left hand had begun to grip the edge of the mahogany podium to maintain her balance. Her shoulder muscles contracted, and a large bead of sweat began to trace down from her hairline. Victor Dane stood at the shadowed corner of the stage, leaning slightly toward a senior member of Vera Global's board standing nearby. He whispered, his voice carrying a cold triumph, "Look at her left hand, Richard. Her motor mechanics are failing. Her nervous system won't last another 10 minutes. Have the secretary prepare the emergency meeting invocation documents to trigger the keyman clause the moment she drops. We cannot allow the stock price to tank because a CEO suffered a stroke on live television. In the mezzanine control room, Jack Mercer knew their time was up. He didn't choose to charge onto the stage like an impulsive hero to pull Serena away. Action would turn this moment into a media scandal that would ruin the entire company. Jack acted as a senior systems technician. He pulled the brass master override key from his pocket, inserting it straight into the emergency lock of the main area lighting distribution panel. Based on the architectural schematics and Illinois state building safety codes that Jack had memorized, he knew the Palmer House power system possessed a mandatory compliance protocol. When an overtemperature alert was triggered near sensitive components, the system would automatically cut local power to prevent fire hazards. Jack used a small piece of copper wire to short-circuit 2 signal ports of the secondary current sensor, generating a spoofed signal indicating a malfunction. Level 2 alert, lithium battery bank and main projection housing overheating. Click, a heavy mechanical relay click echoed inside the main electrical cabinet. Instantly, the entire high-power halogen lighting array pointing directly at Serena Vale's position shut down completely, preventing fire risks according to the building's automated programming. The room didn't plunge into darkness. Instead, the automated emergency backup lighting activated, bathing the stage in a soft, cool, and safe amber glow. The radiant heat pressure vanished within 3 seconds, giving Serena's lungs a window of space to release the sudden spasm. "What the hell is this?" Victor Dane roared, his elegance vanishing entirely from his face. Turned to his 2 private bodyguards from the Internal Risk Assessment Division guarding the mezzanine entrance. "Get up to the control room right now. Crush whatever bastard is touching the main breaker panel. Turn the halogen lights back on for me at all costs." The 2 large guards rushed straight up the mezzanine stairs, busting through the latch of the technical control room door. Before Jack could pull the master key out of the slot, one guard lunged, grabbing his injured right shoulder tightly and slamming his frame hard against the concrete wall behind him. A blunt, dry crack echoed from Jack's shoulder joint. The intense pain caused his vision to blur for a second, his breath hitching in his throat. The second guard ripped the keycard from his uniform chest, snarling, "You're fired, Mercer. Step away from that electrical cabinet or I'll snap your other arm." The situation at this moment seemed to have spiraled entirely out of control. These 2 flipped the manual override lever, the hot lighting system would turn back on, and Serena would collapse under Victor Dane's pressure before the speech could conclude. But the 2 guards didn't know that during the preceding 20 minutes, Jack Mercer's fingers hadn't just been touching the lighting wires. Utilizing the Gold Supreme executive keycard Serena had provided, Jack had executed a serial data transmission routing from Victor's jamming transmitter straight into the Hotel Media Center's main display distribution server. Just as the guard prepared to shove Jack onto the floor a second time, a massive, rapid, and panicked uproar erupted from down in the ballroom. On the 3 massive 10-meter LED screens placed behind the main stage podium, which were originally meant to display the merger logos of Vera and Hellion North, the graphics had vanished. Instead, all 500 investors, major shareholders, and CNBC reporters were staring at a classified document scrolling automatically. It was a screenshot of an encrypted internal email thread between Victor Dane's personal account and a notorious short-selling hedge fund in Chicago, sent at exactly 11:30 p.m. that very night. The content of the text appeared clearly in English, magnified 100-fold under the emergency lighting. "Vale's spinal condition will collapse at the 31st minute of the speech, thanks to the heat activation and telemetry jamming systems installed at the Palmer House. Have your fund prepare short orders for 50 million Vera shares the moment confirmation hits the live broadcast. Profits are split 50-50 after I assume the interim CEO position under the Keyman clause." The Palmer House ballroom exploded into unprecedented chaos. The sound of breaking glass, the shouting of stock exchange representatives, and the frantic clicking of camera shutters aimed directly at Victor Dane filled the air. Beneath the stage, Serena Vale remained standing straight, both hands resting lightly on the edge of the wooden podium. In the cool glow of the emergency lights, her face bore no remaining trace of physical weakness. She looked down at Victor Dane, her gaze holding absolute contempt for the man who had turned a human being's body into a financial wager. From the rear doors of the conference hall, Vera Global's general counsel entered, accompanied by 2 middle-aged men in dark suits wearing badges of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, XE, and 2 federal agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. They navigated through the crowd, parting on either side, advancing straight toward Victor Dane's position as he attempted to retreat toward the kitchen service exit. "Mr. Dane," the general counsel said, his voice echoing clearly through the main audio system which Jack Mercer had restored to priority access. "The board of directors just voted to suspend all your positions at Vera Global 2 minutes ago after the evidence of market manipulation was made public on the main screens. You are being placed under administrative arrest pending investigation into the charges of..." corporate espionage, unlawful breach of private medical data, and violations of the Federal Securities Market Manipulation Act. Please cooperate and step this way with us." Victor tried to open his mouth to defend himself, his face gray as ash, sweat pouring down his collar past his crookedly tied bow tie. He looked up at the LED screens, then toward Serena Vale, realizing that the entire intricate trap he had constructed over 2 years had been dismantled by a night shift maintenance worker, using nothing more than a short-circuit bypass loop. The two law enforcement officers stepped up, locking his hands behind his back with 2 white plastic zip ties before leading him through the side door into the kitchen area, completely terminating the corporate political career of a cold-blooded predator. The dawn of Friday swept past the double-paned reinforced glass of the Vera Global Tower, leaving pale orange streaks on the 64th floor corridor floor. The media storm that had erupted from the gala night at the Palmer House Hotel had now begun to cool as major financial publications uniformly reported on the historic internal purge of the conglomerate. Vera's stock index, after a few hours of light volatility during early trading, had begun to stabilize as investors recognized that Victor Jourdain's departure served as a testament to the effectiveness of the company's governance and risk control systems. The federal police patrol cars had long since departed from the underground ramp, returning the customary quiet to the Wacker Drive Financial Center. At the main executive office, Jack Mercer stood bent over the large mahogany desk. He carefully packed his flathead screwdrivers, pliers, and 2 rolls of electrical tape into his frayed canvas bag. His right shoulder joint, where Victor's private guard had slammed him hard against the concrete wall the night before, still bore a large purple bruise and fired faint, aching pulses whenever he overextended his arm. His temporary night shift service contract as a seasonal maintenance technician for the tower had officially concluded at 5 o'clock in the morning. Jack knew the protocol of these massive corporations. Once critical security incidents were resolved, independent contract workers like him would have their files processed swiftly by HR, paid their hourly wages, and have their keycards revoked to ensure the accounting ledgers remained completely clean. He didn't expect a thank you, nor did he wait for some cinematic reward from the ultra-wealthy. His sole objective right now was to catch the earliest bus back to his apartment in Bridgeport to hold Noah and verify his son's heart maintenance medication supply. Jack pulled the zipper of the canvas bag, the metal track letting out a dry rasping sound in the empty office space. Just as he prepared to lift the steel toolbox with his left hand, the sliding glass door leading into the main office slowly parted. Serena Vale walked in. Today, she did not don her luxurious emerald green silk satin evening gown, nor did she use a wide black robe to conceal her scars or the mechanical framework behind her back. She wore a simple charcoal gray business suit, her black hair neatly combed back. For the first time since Jack had known this woman, she didn't stand with a forced stiffness or attempt to move in expensive high heels. Serena was seated in a high-tech mobile chair, ergonomically designed from carbon fiber to support her entire thoracic and lumbar vertebrae area naturally. She had chosen to make her physical condition public to the world, entirely discarding the mask of a flawless icon without defects that Victor Dane had once used to blackmail her. The mobile chair stopped about 2 meters from the desk. Serena looked at Jack's canvas bag, then her gaze rested on the bruise exposed at the collar of his uniform. "Human Resources just reported to me that your seasonal contract is scheduled for final settlement at 9 o'clock this morning, Mr. Mercer." Serena spoke, her voice devoid of the icy chill of a CEO facing bankruptcy, carrying instead a grounded, realistic rhythm of someone who had just crossed the line of life and death. A gentle, sincere smile appeared on her weary face for the first time. Using her left hand, she slid a file bound in a navy blue leather cover across the mahogany desktop toward him. "They informed me that the union clauses for night shift technicians do not carry long-term commitments for occupational safety or full medical insurance for dependents. I think Vera's financial fund needs to alter that structure, starting with you." Jack looked at the file, his hands still gripping the strap of his canvas bag. "I only did the job of a technical systems troubleshooter, Ms. Vale. I am not seeking a position that lies outside my competence." "Your competence doesn't lie within gas valves," Jack, Serena said, her gaze locking onto his eyes, steadfast and filled with profound respect. "Your competence lies in the fact that you know how to keep a living system from collapsing when pressure reaches its ultimate threshold. This conglomerate has thousands of frontline employees working in warehouses, underground engine rooms, and technical shafts. They face health risks every single day while the executive board only looks at revenue charts. I want you to sign for this position." It wasn't a $10 million check like the cheap fictional stories found online, a type of unrealistic reward that would immediately be audited by federal tax agencies and land a poor man in legal trouble. The file on the desk was an official personnel appointment decision stamped with Vera Global's board seal. Jack Mercer was appointed as the permanent director of operational safety infrastructure and employee health for the conglomerate. The position brought him a stable salary of the American upper middle class, an independent budget to improve working conditions for the maintenance crews, and most importantly, A Supreme Platinum Medical Insurance Package, zero deductible, covering the total cost of specialist cardiac evaluations and medications for all immediate family members at any hospital within the state of Illinois. Jack looked at the line printing his name next to the new title. His fingers brushed against the smooth paper. His right shoulder felt as though it had shed a portion of the heavy weight that had oppressed it for 5 long years since the day he lost his EMT license. He didn't express gratitude with flowery prose. He merely gave a slight nod, signed his name in the blank space at the bottom of the legal document, and accepted the permanent blue keycard printed with his own photo and new title. 2 weeks later, the biting cold of the Chicago winter still blew through the blocks, but at a tree-lined suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, the atmosphere was entirely different. The damp rented apartment with the rattling gas heater in Bridgeport had become a thing of the past. Jack had moved their belongings to a small but sun-drenched bungalow featuring a quiet steam-powered central heating system, located just a 3-block walk from the Lane Tech College prep school. Inside the new living room, Noah sat before a massive oak architectural drafting table that Jack had gifted him using his first salary advance. The 8-year-old boy wore a warm navy blue sweater, his plump cheeks having regained their rosy color, completely free of the paleness from the days spent living in a room smelling of canned chicken soup. The small heart monitor on his chest remained entirely silent, no longer emitting those frantic, threatening beeps because 3 days prior, the chief of pediatric cardiology at the Ann and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital had personally examined him and confirmed that Noah's pulmonary artery pressure was at a perfect level thanks to the new medication regimen fully covered by the insurance. Noah used a soft, premium charcoal stencil, carefully ruling the final lines on a large blueprint sheet. The boy drew a colossal hospital building with an expansive glass dome structure, featuring gentle ramp pathways for wheelchairs and grand doors always thrown open to welcome the sunlight. Beneath the corner of the blueprint, Noah didn't draw thick stone columns to support the building from above like he used to. Hearing the sound of Jack walking in from the kitchen with 2 mugs of warm milk, Noah raised his head, his dark eyes sparkling with pride. The boy gently spun the blueprint toward his father and smiled, a smile that no longer contained the anxiety or fear that he was a financial burden to his family. "Dad, look at this," Noah whispered, his tiny finger pointing to the foundation of the building drawn with very thick, deep charcoal lines. "I drew a building that doesn't need giant columns at the top to stand straight. It can withstand all the blizzards blowing in from Lake Michigan, because the foundation at the bottom is made too thick and too solid to ever be broken." Jack set the 2 mugs of milk down next to the drafting table. He looked at his son's drawing, then at the child's tiny hands, hands that were constructing their own dreams without being suffocated by the worry of basic survival. He bent down, wrapping his left arm around his son's back, pulling Noah into a tight embrace, pressing his gaunt face close against the boy's warm little shoulder. The tears held back through so many years of exhausting night shifts, through every time he counted loose change on a modeled Formica counter, now truly fell, lightly smudging a tiny corner of the charcoal trace on the drawing. His right shoulder at this moment no longer carried the sensation of a broken tool or a piece of discarded scrap metal. It had become part of a new foundation that was solid, immovable, and entirely unshakable by any cold wind life could blow their way.